listening to the Adventure Party for the first week of June 2022. This week, the party takes a couple of months to plan out a years-long, open-ended discussion on campaigns that last more than a year. The Adventuring Party, discussing tabletop and real gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Dave.
I'm Scarr.
I'm Xaosseed.
And once again, we've brought back our co-collaborator, Xaosseed of the semi-infamous gaming blog Seed of Worlds. And he has yet another topic he would like to broach the party with today.
So I have heard that long campaigns have been weighing on your mind, Scarr. What particularly has you troubled?
A couple of things, but in my usual style, it's an awful lot of theoretical nonsense that's mainly going to be... One of the main things is, what's the definition of a long campaign? Because I know fellow Adventure Party member Graham has a very strong definition of it being like a campaign that will go on for 3 or 5 years. But a lot of other people would say a campaign that lasts a year would also count as a long, because it's a major time investment.
Mm-hmm.
And the last couple of years, for me it has been the approximately a year-long campaign has been where I've been falling into, where for various reasons, mostly to do with character progression, to be honest, is we found that whatever default leveling system we used or XP system, we found that about 30 sessions in, we were getting to a high enough climactic point in our games where it made sense to start winding down. And I've been finding that the last couple of campaigns I've had, the average has been about 35 to 40 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about a year's work. And the question is, like, if that's my standard now, if that's the cadence that I have set myself up for, and then I go thinking to myself, do I want to play a short or a long campaign? Am I suggesting that those are short campaigns and a proper long campaign is a 3 to 5 year commitment of time? Or what I already have, a long campaign and a short campaign, is like a dozen sessions? And I'm not, as I weigh this over, like, I have to think, like, is my definition going to gel with what other people said? Because, like, if I say I want to make a short campaign and then it runs to 12 sessions, are they going to say, you said this is going to be short and yet we're here for twice as long as I thought we were going to be?
Mm-hmm.
Or if I say it's a long campaign and I mean 30 sessions, but they're thinking, oh, he wants me to commit to the next 10 years of my life playing the same Elven Fire Mage. I'm not in for that. I guess that's sort of my worry, is like the language we use for what is a long or short campaign is vague, and the length of a campaign often has a lot to do with, like, what does the system encourage over how much physical time passes between the start of a campaign and the end.
Yes. So first, let's say, I think measuring things in number of sessions is the only sensible thing, because, like, some people will be punching out 4 sessions a month, possibly more, and other times it's like when we can all get babysitting once every 3 months. So let's say, like, in campaign, there's 2 things. One is like the amount of stuff you can get done in sessions. So there's going to be like the actual character's arc, but then, and then there's, real time is mostly independent of that, except for the fact that, like, the longer it goes on in real time, the more you've got the chance that life gets in the way. Someone's going to move away. Someone's life circumstances are going to, change in a major way. They're going to go to a night shift. There's, other stuff is going to happen. That means that where they were available, they're no longer available. But let's just say, for the purposes of this, we're going to say life doesn't get in the way. We're just going to talk about what block of sessions is a long campaign.
People are going to argue the terms over and over, but I think that number of sessions is going to have to be the most sensible yardstick.
Yeah, like, as has come up before the show, having that adult conversation early and thoroughly is the way to have it, because people have different notions of what a short campaign or long campaign is. most of my gaming history has been for, well, what a lot of people call very long campaigns, going for years. I don't find anything particularly special about that. It's the type I love to run and play. It's only lately that I've really run any significant number of one-offs and mini campaigns.
For me, the concept of the long campaign is very much aspirational. It's the reason it's long is to make it long. The reason to have a long campaign is to get through the process of having a long campaign. If that makes sense, it's a sort of an inherent automatic goal assumed by pioneers like Gygax and why can't I remember the Pendragon guy's name?
Greg Stafford.
Stafford, yes. Greg Stafford infamously came up with what is often considered the quintessential campaign, which takes place over something like 50 years in world and is expected that you'll have generations of characters going through it. And therefore there's a large number of in-game. I think it's assumed that every adventure is 1 year passes in the world, and this is what you got up to that summer, with the assumption, therefore, that each year of the campaign would be 1 or 2 sessions, and then some downtime done in between.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at somewhere between 50, 70 sessions.
Yeah, so exactly. So I think, like, depending on your downtime setup and the way that you're running the game, like, you could have extraordinary amounts of in-game time pass or not. Like, it could be sort of, you do a scene, there's a bunch of downtime, you do another bit, there's another bunch of downtime, and suddenly it's like, or you even just jump cut, like, 3 years later. What have you been doing? You were busy sort of setting up your... You all collectively decide to found this keep. Now we smash cut to, it's a decade later. You're finally up and running and stable. The past decade has just been like bears and bandits and unending woes of trying to hack the wilderness into some kind of farmland. But that's what you've been up to, and now you're here, and now we get back to kind of like adventuring. So you could have big amounts of time pass if that's the style of game you're doing. Or you could have people running almost like hour to hour.
And an awful lot of people will tend to almost default that hour by hour place because, it takes them the effort to get into their characters' heads that abstracting time would sort of knock them out of it.
Yeah. And also a bit like, or I find it happens with effectively in-game FOMO. It's like, we can't jump ahead in time, like we've got too much stuff to do.
And the assumption is, well, doing that stuff will be just as fun as skipping to the next major plot point. And it's sort of left to the GM to say, I'm not so sure. You have killed everyone below over level 5 in the major facility. No one's going to stop you. I need to skip to the point where the dragons show up. But that's a pacing question as opposed to a campaign timeline session. And yeah, I do agree that the number of sessions is the only really useful metric that we can have here. Although there is also the question of like how long is each of those sessions. That as I say, I've been assuming a system of 30 to 40, 3 to 4 hour sessions, and that's a reasonable amount of time. That's 90 to 160 hours of game time.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people, particularly people who have those, we can only get together once every 3 months things. You often see them going to massively long sessions. They'll basically book off the entire weekend and have 2 8-hour sessions over the weekend or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Or longer. Hand up. Like I in the pre-pandemic days, I was quite happy to meet up with people for lengthy day, pretty much day-long sessions, only really interrupted by eat food and the odd walk.
Yeah, you could very easily split if you had a whole Saturday, you could easily split it into a Monday session, then have a proper lunch, then an afternoon session, have a dinner, and it's all about what like, are you packing a lot into that time? And
But on the other extreme, I remember talking to someone before who was running a regular campaign at lunchtime in work with some of their workmates. And it would be less than an hour per session, but people were enjoying it, and they were very tightly focused with, from the sounds of it. So that worked for them.
Yeah. I do think that that's sort of an element you have to think about is like how focused are people on the game. Like if you have a sufficiently focused group of players, you can get an awful lot done in a much shorter amount of time than people would expect. Particularly if you've got a very small group. Like if you're running a one-on-one session, you can power through quite a lot of content very quickly because there's no debating time.
Yeah.
People often lament debating time in a game, but other people would say, well, that's part of the game. That back and forth thing is a vital part of the game, and absolutely it is, but it also eats up an awful lot of time.
To come back to your question at the top is, so if I understood this correctly, it's how do you, on launching what you're intending to be a long campaign, make sure that everyone's along for the ride? Is that kind of the question?
Yeah, this is like, what expectations are you having? How much of your duration should you have estimated beforehand, and how much should players be expecting? As I say, I've fallen into this habit, and I'm looking back at my gaming career, what I would consider my long campaigns are sort of an anomaly. Like I've had a 3-year-long Dark Heresy campaign, running mostly weekly, and that was a huge investment of time, but enormously satisfying when we got through it. But before that and since then, I have fallen into this basically year-long. I would consider those, while not long campaigns, I would say that those are complete campaigns. In the course of that year play, those 30 to 40 sessions, we played a complete campaign and got to a good stopping point and rolled off. And therefore, I wonder, like, if I am planning to go for, let's say, a 2-year campaign, and I would call that long because it's more than a year, and again, personal definitions will come into it. How do I approach that differently? Like, first off, am I going into it planning? Am I saying, well, like, one of the things is, like, am I going to be certain that's going to be a year, or is it actually going to naturally end in, like, a year, 15 months?
Well, question to you, actually. Then, I think you're asking the wrong question by saying I want to run a 2-year campaign. It's like, what's the campaign you want to run? Like, what are you saying? You ran complete campaigns. They happen to take a year. It's like, I think it'd be more set up as like, hey, this is a campaign where we're going to try and do blah blah, and frame the tempo. This is what I think it'll take, is in, like, if we run 5-hour sessions every Wednesday night, I reckon it'll take X amount of time. So this would be the time commitment I'd be looking for, and this is kind of the theme of the game. But it's like, it's more coming at it rather than saying we're just going to start running on this cadence and run for this length of time and see where we get to. It'd be more like, why? What do you think is going to happen in that time? What are you hoping to do? It's like, is this we're going to take some first level characters and we're aiming to make them lords of the castle? Is it we're going to go fight Tiamat the Dragon Queen? Is it we're going to do Storm King's Thunder the book, and we know it has this much content in it? Yeah, it's like, I think it'd be easier to frame exactly why you're asking for this length of time if you can say, what are you going to do with this length of time if people commit to it?
And that leads into the worry of, like, can you predict with any certainty how long a certain thing's going to happen? Because we all have stories of, we're just going to go shopping this one time, and then 5 sessions later, the planet is exploding, and the players are jumping into a bag of holding with a portable hole, so that, because, blowing off into the astral plane is way better than what's happening here, or something. It's just like, obviously, as you become more confident as a GM, you get a better sense of how long a different thing's going to take, but you can never be perfectly accurate, because the players are always going to be a...
But I don't think that's a problem. I think basically if you are overrunning because your players faffed, or like they had too much fun shopping, or they decided to like do that whole thing where they threw the Festival of Lights for that village that time, that's fine, because you still had all of your content, all of your, like, there was like the hooks, all of the stuff, the sandbox waiting for them was all still out there. They did this sidebar, they spent some time. That's not a problem from this point of view. Like, that is, calendar time has been used. People had fun at the table. The sort of the plot, like the what was supposed to be happening in the big campaign, or what you intended to use this time to do, didn't happen. But as long as you weren't sitting there twiddling your thumbs going, I'm so bored, I don't see that as a problem, because they were there, they came to game, they entertained themselves, stuff happened, that was fine. It's like, I'm not worried when it's affected with us, with spontaneously generated content blocking me from using the planned content, because that just means that, great, I just save it, I roll it forward. When when everyone eventually gets around to playing it, I've got the stuff ready to go. Worse would be if they figured out, like, it's if they shortcut something. You were like, oh, I've got all this figured out. This is what's going to happen. And they're like, well, hang on, it's clearly the Vizier. We shove him out a window, session 2. You're like, uh-oh. I was planning for like 8 months worth of stuff with that guy, and now he's gone. And now, uh-oh. Your campaign has suddenly come to an abrupt shortening.
I wouldn't necessarily say so. I mean, the consequences of flat out murdering a Vizier should be, well, fodder for quite a few interesting sessions. I mean, the political chaos alone would be quite a sight to behold.
Yeah, if you can then spin more stuff out of that, great. Like, your initial plan is now gone out the window. Like, true, you may well be able to do stuff, but it's more if you're talking about coming in and asking players, I want you to commit to what I'm calling a long campaign, because I've got a plan. Or like, why would you ask them to commit to that? And if I've got a vision, it's going to take this much time to play out, then I think that's a reasonable thing. If they short circuit it basically by shoving the Vizier out the window, I think, to me, there's a really interesting question of, do you say, hey, that thing you signed up for, you kind of broke it. So now if you're happy to wing it, continuing, fantastic. But that thing you signed up for is toast.
That's something a GM could say. At the very least, it could be worth pointing out that, well, the game has changed.
Yeah, I don't think you want to hide that, sir.
Or another devil's advocate, say nothing, as in, yeah, that's, like, as in, go on as if things hadn't changed, and maybe scrabble under the hood to create something else out of the ashes, so to speak.
But yeah, I guess then there's a difference between if you're having a plotted or planned campaign versus you're running a sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
With a sandbox game, end goals are sort of more vague by design, because you might have different phases of your sandbox, your exploration, your control phase, and your I am king now phase. And then you answer the questions of, do we actually want to play through the king phase, or we just, end on the medal ceremony and move on. But with a sandbox game, it's an often more that you are committing to, we want to have a certain amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
We want to spend, we want a game, we want to, for the foreseeable future, we don't expect any of us to move away in the next 2 years. So let's have a game set up for sandbox play and just see how things go. And if it falls apart, that might be fine for some groups. But if you have a plan, then you're sort of dealing out, well, this needs to happen, something like this needs to happen after, but that'll take 5 sessions to get from there to there. So from there, I can estimate that this will take me 30 sessions, 40 sessions, whatever. And then, of course, if you say you're using a pre-published campaign, then you have a very explicit end goal of, let's get to the end of this published adventure in some fashion. Like, presumably there's some horrible villain on the cover. Let's play until they either win or are dead.
Mm-hmm.
And those, I guess, each of those does a different approach. Like is let's play until we get bored a valid campaign goal?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's like you can't just say, like, we have this group of people who want to play, the emphasis is on the play, let's just keep going and see where this goes. That's valid.
It absolutely is it comes to a second, or to what I regard as kind of like a strong second part of that is depends on who you're talking to. Like if and I think of some of our acquaintance, we know that like there's groups out there that's basically it's the same people they always play on Tuesdays, and so they know they'll get together on Tuesday. They know they'll play something. I've been doing it for years. You know, they did Star Wars. They did Pathfinder. They've done World of Darkness. You know, once they finish kind of one cycle of stuff, they'll move on and do something else. The important thing is like they game on that night with this group. They will find something to do at the table that night. The like other variation is we're going to crunch through this content. So therefore, like, you know, we will carve out chunks of our calendar until we get the whole way through this content, and then we'll just stick a pin in it, and that we'll call it good. So like that's another thing. And then like slightly more what I would consider old school is that just like we're here to game, and it's somebody's long run. You know, someone is the forever DM, and the players are just chasing up on hooks that could be from years ago. I had the great good fortune of joining a long form campaign where it was the same party picking up their own campaign from back in the late 80s, like original Blackmoor stuff.
Oh.
And one of the artifacts we had in game was one of the players' original notes from back in the day. They had forgotten everything. So we had a genuine adventuring journal with like sketchy notes that had incredible details of like what happened in the vampire's tomb, but like 2 lines about how they got there. And we were traipsing about the countryside trying to figure out where's this goddamn tomb. So we, you know, that was, you could have, like, there was enough hooks and stuff and unfinished business that if they were like, okay, you know what, let's go give that thing a go again, they could just sort of pick it up, go like, where's the list of stuff we haven't solved yet? And then just like pick one of them and go at it. So there's a bunch of different models, but I think the big factor here is the people you're asking the question to. If you don't have history with whoever it is, you probably don't want to say, hey, do you want to commit to a massive open-ended campaign of form uncertain for an indefinite period of time? Because, you know, you don't know each other's playstyle that well, and so on. There may well be some wrinkles. If you've known each other for years and years, you'll pretty much know exactly what that offer implies, and you'll be able to go like, yeah, sure, cool. I know what I'm getting in for. So I think if that kind of open-ended long-form campaign is an offer you make to a pool that you've history with, if to get there, better to run a couple of short cycle things, even if it's a case of like, you know what, I intend to run in my giant lizard world. I want to run a giant lizard world campaign. The entire premise is like all of the city-states, every single one's ruled by a T-Rex. Fine, that's what we're doing. And what I'm going to first do is I'm going to run like a 5-session mini campaign. Really, it's a tryout to, you know, see, does this work at all? People commit to 5 sessions. That's fine. That's no huge burden. Do that. See if it works. If it works, you keep going. You say, hey, that was fun. Do we keep going? If it doesn't, stick a pin in it. Maybe change up the people at the table. Maybe figure out actually what we all wanted to be playing was Dark Heresy. Change what you're doing and so on. But like, if you don't know that you definitely want to go ahead and just run long form stuff, do mini stuff to kind of just sound out who's around the table, and then you can go, okay, you know what? I think now that we've all figured out each other's styles, let's give this big thing a go.
Yeah, no, sorry, I just, something came to mind as something I've been trying to do lately, because I have a bad habit of getting a new system that I want to try, a new setting I want to try, and launching into a long campaign. And I'd be wiser, and I've tried to start doing this lately, to run shorter games. The aforementioned one-offs and mini-campaigns. One, to get myself acquainted with the system and setting. And two, to make sure that the players are up for it. And to see, are they actually enjoying it, as opposed to finding out much later. And yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for basically a trial run before launching into the year-long or 5-year-long, epic saga.
Yeah, and it's something that I tie into. Like I said, the idea of it's a lot easier to do if you have your fixed group. But one of the things that maybe I don't know if this is a consequence of my sort of year-long cycle or the year-long cycle is a consequence of this, but I tend to gravitate to playing with a different group each time. Not everyone changes. I don't swap to completely different people. But I'll generally have 2 or 3 core people and then take in a bunch of people I knew from back in the day and a bunch of brand new people I'd never met before. And it's part of my thing is I like meeting new and old people as part of my gaming. It's a big part of the thing for me. And that means that A, if I commit to a long campaign, it'll be a long time before I cycle people out again, and B, there will be less certainty that people are up for the long game because this might very well be the first time this particular group has been brought together, and the longer something goes on for, the chance of issues going up. Although I never had major issues in it, but it is something to be aware of. It's just
yeah, I mean, you can never discount the human chemistry factor of just once you've got a bunch of people, they just, individually, everybody's perfectly nice. You get on great with everybody. 2 to 3 folk around the table just do prefer not to play with these particular others. And then that's going to put a clock on what you're trying to do. And better to kind of do that as a short cycle and then say, hey, who'd be up for call it season 1, season 2. Season 1, 5 sessions long, cool. Or and then okay, who'd be up for coming back to do another bit? And
that's particularly if your goal is particularly to try out some new system or some new setting, having that sort of experimental phase might be work. And of course, yeah, as you say, you can have your initial cycle, do 10, 15 sessions with them. Say this is season 1 done, and then that gives people a chance to get off the bus, or new people who'd been interested to get on, and you can cycle out that way. So if that sort of meeting people / group maintenance is something you're looking for, you can try this sort of short cycle followed by extensions, and yeah, you can work it that way.
Yeah, I do actually. One thing I should probably attempt to get better at myself is also with a long campaign, if you have this is what's going to happen at the end of it. Here's the big mystery they're going to uncover. Here's the thing they're going to solve, whatever. They don't get there, then that thing sort of hangs as an unfinished narrative forever. Whereas if there's sub-blocks to it, then it's okay, we didn't get everything done, but we did get these bits done. And you don't feel it's more we set off to do a thing and we didn't really get anywhere.
Yeah, you should be chunkify your content. If your goal is, I am going to run the Great Epic Campaign, I've got all of my Adventure Path modules, and if one of them doesn't work, but you figure out some way to skip to the next one, or put a different adventure in its place, and sort of circle back to that original plot, you can survive contact with the enemy, as it were. The overall thing, you're still here in this scenario. You're still here for a campaign, not for a given set of adventures. And again, I think we keep coming back to the concept of goals. This is what is the goal of having this long campaign? Why do we need this length of time? It's because we have these goals, and maybe the goal is to spend this amount of time gaming. Maybe it is to complete this famous content, or I have this epic plot, or what have you.
Let's say the to spend this amount of time gaming is a secondary one. Like at the very, even if it's like fully West March in the sense of like you sit down, you go, all right, players, what do you want to do? And it's fully driven by the players. Like one would hope that you have no great plan. Like your plan was just like, I'm going to run the sandbox for them and see what they get up to. One would hope that some things get done. Like they got to the dungeon, they poked around a bit, even if, they managed to snatch something from it and scurry away, even if it was costly. Like you can chalk up about like, what did you manage to do? And they can there's some bits of it that could be shaped into a tale of glory for the next time they're sitting in a tavern, as opposed to there was the session where we shopped for gear. There was the session where we got stuck in trying to get our donkeys through in a swamp. We got to the dungeon. We spent an entire session planning. We spent a fourth session getting poking around, poking every tile with a 10-foot pole. Then we ran into 24 ghouls. They ate everyone except the cleric. The cleric spent an entire session sort of lugging everybody's bodies back into town and then resurrecting them, and then everyone argued about they're never going out there again. That's a 5-session campaign that doesn't sound like it was much fun. Or not much got achieved.
Yeah.
So I'd say that would almost to me be the acme of that you want to do better than that. That if you're running short cycle, squash planning, equipment bought off equipment lists, get people to the action ASAP. And then, so you can say it's okay, we did a setup, we did 3 sessions of actual adventuring at risk. And then we did one dividing up the spoils and figuring out what the implications are and what our next steps are. Cool. Achieved something.
I guess that also digs into, that's a bit more styles of play, but if you are in that sort of long form thing, if your group does want to have those, we spend 2 sessions planning for half a session of epic encounter, that lends itself more to the long form.
Mm-hmm.
Because, there's no pressure. That's just we need to get through this content by Halloween or whatever.
Yes. But I think also for the 2 sessions of planning for a half session encounter to have felt valid. If it's 2 sessions of planning and then you go up against Vecna and you manage to get away unscathed or, knock him down or whatever, that's going to feel like time well spent. But it's, you would need some kind of stakes built up. If you just say, hey, the bad guy's Vecna, go figure out how you're going to do with him. Oh, okay. That's going to feel a bit sterile. But if it's, you need to have some...
Presumably 20 previous sessions where you fought through cultists and discovered Vecna's evil plot or whatever.
Something like that. Something that gives you some kind of basically skin in the game. Why do this particular bunch of adventurers care?
Skin in the game and context, as in they can see what, say, Vecna's minions have been up to. They've discovered some of his plans and have an idea of what the stakes are. As in, yeah, those cities we really like. They're going to be ash unless we do something. So we best get on with it.
You think you've sort of hit onto one of the things of a long-term campaign is that it allows for more investment for the players. You have a campaign where the twist at session is that all those places that you were saving from the orcs that time, they've been eaten by the Uber Dragon, and presumably that would inspire an activity against said Uber Dragon. But if it happens 10 minutes into session 1, it doesn't quite have the same impact. So that's sort of the advantage of this long-term campaign, and I guess that would be the thought in my mind is that if I want to have that kind of game where that sort of emotional investment and skin in the game is a vital component, I may need that extra time in sheer sessions just to give players more motivation to be attached to something in the plot or some of the NPCs or location or what have you. That's something I would need to do, and I need that time in order to develop everything.
I mean, yes, but if you've got enough time in hand, and like maybe you don't need to do it in the sense of if you've got enough time in hand and you sort of give players the reins and off they go and do stuff, like they will tell you what they care about. They'll interact with certain people, they'll go to certain places, and then you'll be like, okay, so all I need to do is like Cornelius's shoe shop down by the lake, and they are going to like burn down everything west of there to make sure it's fine. So like, you will get the hooks by just giving players the freedom to go and chase what things they like, and then you can just kind of start pulling on those, and then you've got your investment.
Agreed. I have to say, I do love the talk of emergent gameplay that gets battered around OSR circles a lot. It fits well with what I think, my own notions of GMing, in that where possible, give players the tool, some investment in the world and what have you, but some possible goals, but basically give them the flexibility to actually try things and show where their priorities lie. Open-ended games, like I find more satisfying for that reason. I'm not keen on railroaded material, as a rule.
Yeah, certainly if you're looking for that sort of thing, but like at the same time, there's nothing wrong with a group that says, we've heard that this adventure module or whatever is really cool, let's go through that, and therefore the GM should be sort of trying to figure out how much time they need to get through that. Actually, a lot of adventure modules, certainly since the times of, the Great War of the Spider Queen and the Great Pendragon campaign, they've tended to adhere more to what I would consider my normal of like a year-long campaign. Like Curse of Strahd is a big expansion on the original adventure, but it's still about a year's worth of content. It feels like that is becoming the idea of the long campaign is
Wait. Point of order. How frequently are you talking in certain terms of weekly game sessions?
That would be my estimate. As I said, like I would expect to get like 40 sessions in a year.
Yeah, fine, cool. So cool, yeah, 40 sessions, grand.
I'm not actually sure where I was going with this. I guess what we're saying is that the difference between what we call a shorter or medium term campaign and a long term one is the use of the long term one is in order to develop better sense of goals, to give the free time. We often talk about it. We often try to think about long campaigns as being something that has a long tail, that like we're going into this big, expansive sandbox of ideas. But actually, it's actually more the opposite. It's more like you start off with the full breadth of the sandbox, and then the players will, as they go along, hone in on what matters most to them about that setting, or they'll generate their own plot in some way. Create enemies, create friends, and that would be the advantage of the long-term campaign, is to give that initial level of breathing room so that plot can develop naturally out of the work, and then often the resolution of that emergent plot will actually be relatively straightforward and probably not take quite as long.
Could be. I'm just thinking of like. My only sort of reason I'm not agreeing immediately with you is the sense of that there's plot being like plot, full stop. In the sense of like, imagine if we're going full sandbox. Our heroes start off in like Fly Spec, the village, and they learn of a dungeon. Okay, off they go. They poke around in it. While they're heading out there, they realize that there's like 3 factions out here in the wilderness. There's a collapsed temple. There's a bunch of stuff out here. So the kind of like the overall arc then becomes the heroes getting more knowledge about what's out here, exploring these places, maybe making some allies and enemies, and and gathering sort of ancient treasures as their prowess becomes enough to face these dangers. In a sense of like, there's each of these sort of chunks are like fairly episodic, and like they find out that as they're talking to one bunch of allies that there's this ruin that they could go to, they go deal with that. It doesn't finish their story, in the sense it's not like the end of the plot. It's a continuation, and it's that way that I'm kind of sense it's more like a saga. Like it keeps, you can add stanzas to it, becomes more this ever longer story of the deeds of these heroes, and that's fine. Like there isn't so much. It's like it is this tale of the deeds of these heroes, the things that they have done. It doesn't necessarily have to come to a crescendo or like arrive at a sort of a finale as they sort of chase down things, because you could then end up with, there isn't like the one thing that's the end of the world. It's like there's a whole bunch of these different low to medium, even the high stakes things that you're resolving, and it's all good that you did them. But it doesn't, like if you wrote it out as a screenplay, people would be like, what the hell, your pacing's all over the place. But it was an amazing campaign. I'm just like, I think that maybe perhaps to give us some perspective on all of this, looking at some of the kind of things from what they're saying in D&D Beyond, like what tiers and levels characters started and finished at. Most people start and finish within tier 1 of what they're up to. So like within 3 to 4 levels of start, that's as far as they get. Now, even like, particularly when you've got things like Adventurers League and the likes, where it's assuming like you level up per session, that's saying that most people are running extraordinarily short cycle stuff compared to what we're talking about here. So it's actually this long running and flowing thing it's a somewhat unusual,
and it's not something you can force as well. Like the part of it is you need room to breathe. If you don't have a nicely timeline, you need to have this couple of sessions of not dead air, but like ability to mull over what's happened and get involved in it and make decisions and all that. That's not something you could just squish into a couple of sessions. It's something that happens in the dead time. No, not dead. I keep saying dead time. I mean, like, it happens in little pieces scattered throughout your first 10, 20 sessions. Or even as time goes on, it'll develop.
Coming back to like the very start thing of like even getting people started on this and sort of setting the expectations for what's supposed to be happening. So like people kind of have an idea of which way they're supposed to be running. I'm just thinking through of kind of like major campaigns of big campaigns that I've set up in the past while. It's often been, there's a thing you need to explore. There's a mystery you need to solve. You've gotten shanghaied and imprisoned. Okay. Then you've got one that was just like, you're a bunch of adventurers, turn up and play. And let's see where we get to. And then one last that was, there's a relationship powder keg, as in there's an inheritance question that's coming live. How are you going to solve that? Like the sort of the big central hook that kicked things off was rarely there's a threat, there's a combat threat. It was always there's either a role-playing thing, like there's a mystery or there's a succession crisis, or an exploration thing. Has anyone ever set it up with like, there's a threat to the world, you've got to solve it, and that was your actual campaign pitch?
I think so. One of my most successful campaigns has been Savage Worlds Kaiju game, and every time I run that, the Kaiju have been a threat, but they haven't been a threat you directly encounter. They're a threat that you investigate and try to figure out, can we poke this in the right way that it won't crush our home tower?
Yeah, can you prod it into a different direction or to going back to sleep somehow?
Yeah, and there was often entire plot lines which weren't directly about kaiju, but like dealing with the technology to deal with, to manipulate them, or figure out the curse of the monkey god, or these things. So there are looming issues, but they're not issues you deal with apply sword to man.
So I think that's kind of for a successful long form campaign. To me, it's like you need to basically, set up the ramp down which the players will slide into the campaign they will come into the game with momentum of hey, there's a thing we ought to be doing, as opposed to you're in a tavern and then they're static and they've got no momentum in any direction. Whereas if you're in a tavern because you've just you're arrived off in a ship and this is the city you've heard that there's a treasure map in. You've got something you're up to. To me is you can get as long as there's some kind of mystery, hook, promise of riches, thing that they can get after, then the campaign will generate itself by people sort of going around, how do we get after this? And they'll come up with ideas and off they'll go. But if it's a case of, to me, the sort of the combat threat it's a hard one to kind of just fully base a campaign around because it's...
Do you have to throw the Vizier out the window in session 2?
A bit. It's one, or two, it's sort of A, why do I care about any of these people? Because I have spent no time with them yet. You need to give people to me you need to give people a reason to go and poke around and become familiar with, and also to this place they're poking about in. So if and when something threatens it, their answer is not whoa, fast horses, let's go. And then that's how you sort of, the successful long campaigns run themselves, because people slid into a thing, they dug up a bunch of leads themselves and then decided among themselves which ones they were going to go after, what of all the hooks they found they wanted to actually deal with. And that's when the thing starts to feed itself and you get the flywheel going.
Yeah.
Gone over a fair chunk.
We have had a long-term podcast episode about this, I think. But yeah, I do think we've had good food for thought, and it's definitely made me think about where my next campaign is going and why I would want to worry about how long it is. Anything else to go over?
No, I think that makes sense to me.
No, I think there's been plenty covered alright today.
All right. Well, if you would like to spend 3 to 5 years explaining to us why we're wrong, you can hit us up on our social media. But for now, this party is committed to 5 years playing through Curse of Strahd. And it's over. Thanks for listening to The Adventure Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventurePTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party was released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike version 3 license.